Check out the latest highlights from the Nourishing You podcast.
You mentioned briefly that hormonal health, period health, a healthy ovulation is really important for women, even if they're not trying to conceive. So can you talk to why that would be important?
Yeah, I love that question because again, so many of us have this idea that it's, your menstrual cycle is only important when you're trying to have children. And for a woman of reproductive age, so, a woman of reproductive age, for whatever reason, we're sold this idea that ovulation is kind of like this cool add-on. And I often teach with analogies. So if I were to use the analogy of a car, if I buy a car, there's all these add-ons I can get. If I chose to get heated seats or if I chose to get air conditioning, I think they all come with air conditioning now, but just, go with it.
Heated steering wheel.
Heated steering wheel. Exactly. Now, whether or not I choose to get the heated steering wheel, it doesn't change the way that the car functions. It doesn't change the way that the engine works because it's a machine. But for whatever reason, we're sold this idea that our ovulatory menstrual cycles are kind of similar to that. But that's not the case. So, ironically, in an adult human female, our menstrual cycle is not this add-on. It's a central part of how our body functions. And so a few examples of that, one example of that would be the case of hypothalamic amenorrhea, HA. And so in a case like that, it's defined, generally speaking, as going 6 months or more without having a period. So no ovulation, no menstruation. And what causes something like that? HA is associated with undernutrition, overexercise, and stress. So you basically have a situation where somebody is potentially exercising a ton. The stereotypical example would be an Olympic athlete or something like that, and or a person who is, restricting their eating and caloric intake to the point that their body can no longer sustain a menstrual cycle. So, and, to put that into perspective, even if you have no intention of having children in your lifetime, you probably don't want osteoporosis. And when HA is extended for a period of time, it does increase a woman's lifetime risk of osteoporosis because, put in layman's terms, this is an example where she's kind of starving and her body is reacting by suspending ovulation, suspending the additional, energy, because it's just not a good time to have a baby, for example, from your body's perspective. So, that gives you an example because then when we look at the menstrual cycle as a vital sign, a vital sign is just your body's, it's a bodily response that we can measure. And the most common vital signs would be like your heart rate, your body temperature, your respiratory rate, your blood pressure, things like that. And we all have the sense that if your, blood pressure was too high or too low, not only does it tell your doctor that there's something wrong, it also gives them a sense of what could be wrong because we kind of know what could be causing high blood pressure, for example. And so in that same way, when the menstrual cycle is consistently falling outside of those normal parameters, it can tell us something as well. So in the case of HA, it can tell us, okay, well, we need to see what's going on with this woman. Is she eating? Is she resting? Is she exercising? Like what's going on with her? And another example could be PCOS. And so polycystic ovarian syndrome is characterized by long irregular cycles. So that's one of the possible criteria where the cycles are 35 days or more. We're seeing maybe fewer than 9 cycles a year, potentially seeing cycles that are varying more than 8 days from cycle to cycle. The other criteria include hyperandrogenism, where you're having a high level of androgens. Maybe she's having unwanted hair, hirsutism, like hair where she doesn't want it, coarse hairs. Maybe she's having acne, and also, cysts on the ovaries. Well, interestingly enough, that condition is associated with insulin resistance, glucose intolerance. It's associated with inflammation. And so again, having these cycles that are outside of that normal criteria could be a sign of a deeper health issue. And, women who experience PCOS have a greater lifetime risk of developing diabetes. So instead of pushing these, kind of health issues under the rug and looking at the menstrual cycle as if it only matters when we're trying to conceive, this gives us an opportunity to really look at how the menstrual cycle can be reflecting back, a picture of our hormonal health and overall health, even regardless of our, current status of trying to conceive or not.
If you enjoyed this short episode, check out our full library on our NAMP YouTube channel, where you can catch up or learn more. Keep in mind that the information on the NAMP podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or legal advice. The NAMP is not liable or responsible for any harm, damage, or illness arising from the use of the information contained herein. By listening to the information on this podcast, you agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the NAMP and all agents. Copyright NAMP, all rights reserved.